Hello, mentors. Welcome to our podcast series, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am your host, Judi Epstein. I am very excited about the wide range of experts who have volunteered to give up their time and expertise. They will share their innovative ideas, their exciting perspectives, their rich resources, and their research with us. Please continue to delve into these topics on their websites and with your legal counsel, healthcare provider, and education professional. Our guests have information that will be relevant to mentors supporting struggling students, parents, teachers, administrators, legal support, and health professionals. We will address all levels of education with issues that affect academic performance. Our goal is to open discussions and introduce a variety of approaches to those searching for information in a free venue. So mentors, let me introduce our guest for today. I want to continue our mini-series on health and nutrition and how they can intersect and have an undetected effect on our students' behavior and academic performance. And we're going to continue today with our guest, Kerah Henebery. I want to talk a little bit about what she does and how maybe we became connected, if she wants to share that with you. Kerah obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Dietetics and a Master of Science degree in Health Promotion Allied Health Sciences from the University of Connecticut. She has a very diverse background in that she is a Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, and as in her background, she's included clinical inpatient and outpatient support for both adults and children populations. But her true passion has always been in her desire to have a private practice where she can integrate her interests in all of these areas with a balance of health. She has a particular interest in food sensitivities, digestive wellness, nutrigenomics, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and hormonal balance. Kerah is a certified LEAP therapist. We'll find out what that is in a few minutes. And she uses the Mediator Release Test, the MRT, which she has mentioned to me before, and I'm going to ask her about, to help target food sensitivities that may be contributing to chronic illness, inflammation, and symptoms associated with some of the diagnoses that our kids have, like ADD and ADHD and migraines. And these can be the result of all kinds of effect that our food is having in our bodies, and the kids don't even realize, adults don't even realize, that some of they're presenting with these symptoms, and it's caused from food. Kerah places a great deal of emphasis on the whole person, and she recognizes that no two individuals are the same. She combines functional nutrition and integrative approach to identify the root cause of chronic health. She uses whole foods and lifestyle changes that she recommends to people after she evaluates her clients, and she encourages them in preventative approaches and restorative health approaches. There's so much there. It's so interesting, and so much of it I am not familiar with. So, Kerah, welcome to the podcast from Just Education, Mentorships in Education. I'm so pleased that you're here.
Thanks, Judi. So happy to be here today.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. I would like to know some of the terms that you have used that you gave to me to introduce you. I'm not familiar with, and I would imagine most of our listeners are not going to be familiar with. So can you explain what functional nutrition is, and an integrative approach to diagnosing some of these health concerns?
Absolutely. So integrative and functional approaches kind of go hand in hand. It's basically the idea that it's an evidence-based approach to patient care that really is digging into and identifying the root cause of disease or imbalances happening in the body so that we can better assess and improve patient outcomes through that treatment.
Okay, and you create an approach when you do a diagnostic evaluation using some of the tests I mentioned. And then from there, you recommend some preventative, so you have some preventative suggestions, and you're hoping, this is where restorative health comes in, you're hoping that by making these changes, they're going to be able to restore their bodies to
Yes.
more healthy.
Exactly. Restorative health is just that, is really digging in from my angle, obviously, as the dietitian, more of a nutrition approach, but yes, giving your body what it needs to be functioning optimally so that they can ideally restore their health and reduce their symptoms.
So I know you've started a new business. It's called Pursue Wellness. Give me a little bit of background on why you felt there was a need for this and what the purpose of your business is.
Yeah, so my mother and I actually are in this together. She's a nurse practitioner, and we, with our own chronic illnesses and struggles, decided that we really wanted to dive into this field so that we could help others really tackle the concerns they have. And a lot of times, people coming to see us have seen other practitioners and they're just not getting the answers they need. They're not seeing the results that they would like. So our approach that we had talked about initially is really that integrative functional approach, looking at root causes, underlying symptoms that may be rearing their head and allowing us to kind of be the investigators for different clues. And that's exactly what we do.
That's a good term. That's a good term. I just want to mention now, because we're talking about Pursue Wellness, that if people want to get more information on Pursue Wellness, they can go to pursuewellness.us. So if they don't have a pencil in front of them and they want to write some things down, they can go there and get more information on this, and we'll mention that again later. In our talk, I like to talk to people before we do the recording, and you mentioned an MRT test that you use in order to evaluate your clients. Can you explain what that is? But I also want you to talk a little bit about how this is important to some parents whose children have been diagnosed with an array of the whole alphabet soup of diagnoses, and how sometimes some of these things that you will be able to evaluate with the MRT test could actually be affecting their academic performance or their ability to control their behavior.
Absolutely.
I know that's a lot, but
yeah, no, we'll break it down. So MRT is the Mediator Release Test. It is one of the gold standards of food sensitivity testing that we have available to us right now, because I know some of this population, people listening, may be familiar with basic food sensitivity tests that they can get that would really just include a couple of different antibodies, IgG being the most prevalent. But for the MRT, it goes one step further. It's looking at, it's called type 3 and type 4 reactions, and it's basically a way to measure the reactivity of foods in the body for an individual person. And everyone is different. Everyone's results will come back differently than the next. So it'll basically break it down into 3 different sections. So what will happen is a patient will go give blood and sends it away to a lab, and that lab will then send us back a full report on 170 different foods and also food chemicals. And the chemicals portion is really important, specifically, children with behavioral concerns or different type of mental disorders. It's really important for that chemical component as well. So we're looking at additives, we're looking at different food dyes, etc., along with 141 foods to match the 29 chemicals. And what it does is it gives us non-reactive foods that are green. They're called green, labeled as green. Okay. Yellow foods will come back as moderately reactive, and then the severe reactive red. So it breaks it down into those 3 color coordinates. And we're able to use those results and institute something called the LEAP diet. And that will basically is an elimination diet of sorts that helps us clue in to eliminate some of those high trigger foods that we know are causing inflammation. So that's what we know about food sensitivities. We know that there's specific foods that cause the bodies to react and in turn release cell mediators like your prostaglandins, interleukins. All these type of things are causing inflammation. So if we can target the foods that are causing that, we can eliminate a lot of symptoms associated with things like ADD or different other mental disorders like even OCD or autism, to name a few.
Can you give me some examples of behavior, negative behavior that might be affected by changing the diet with someone with ODD or ADHD or autism? How would you, what would you see that would tell you, wow, this is working?
Yeah, usually it's a couple of different things. One is attention span, a reduction in hyperactivity, to name a few. But also, there could be other things at play here, which I know we'll probably dig a little bit more into research soon in this talk. But a lot of children diagnosed with these conditions we're finding have a lot of deficiencies in specific vitamins and minerals. So a lot of these things could be the culprit of what's playing a role in their attention spans, etc. But also good nutrition. Also, you'll know by their bowel function is another big one. So sometimes you'll find kids that are coming in with, constipation or diarrhea as well, and those are some of the things that teachers or parents can be on the lookout for as red flags. But if your bowels are functioning appropriately, will be another thing that you could tell things are moving in the right direction.
So what does LEAP stand for?
LEAP is lifestyle and eating and performance.
Okay, and so you do this test, you create a chart. I only know this because I saw one that you did. You create a chart of the green, the yellow, and the red. And the green are foods that the client can continue to eat. Is that correct?
Yeah, so those are the non-reactive foods.
Okay.
And so there's different phases in the LEAP diet. The first 2 weeks are typically the most strict. So we will focus on only green foods, but I help my clients. We basically draw a line, and not only do they come back as green, yellow, and red from the lab, but it also gives them a numerical value attached to them. So we kind of draw a line in the sand, depending on what the options that they have are in the different categories. And we'll come up with a diet plan to only focus on their least reactive, even the least reactive of the green foods, to start for those first 2 weeks, with the goal to slowly reintroduce some of the other foods and kind of pinpoint foods or additives or food chemicals that are causing issues or behavioral changes.
Are there studies that show that some of these approaches for using the approach of nutritional changes, are there studies that show that kids in particular have been known to have changes in their behavior or their focus, their academic performance at school? Do you know any of those studies, or are there studies?
There are studies specific to a lot of different micronutrients and improvement in outcomes, not only in school, in the broader sense, but yes, for attention and hyperactivity. There's actually was a pretty big study for specifically food additives and food coloring in I believe it was 3-year-olds and then 8 and 9-year-olds as well, and it showed that the food additives actually had a significant increase in hyperactivity in children with ADD. So it is something that is a concern from a dietary standpoint. that the food supply, and especially a lot of processed foods that are going to have a lot of additives that may have some, food dye or food coloring, it should be definitely something a parent of a child that has these behavioral issues is looking out for.
So we have the diet that you create as the result of the test, and then is there an integration here with the diet and maybe some medication that people are taking, whether with children or as adults? How is that factored into your research when you're helping a client create an approach that's more holistic?
Yeah, so usually I think nutrition is definitely overlooked. So initially, when it comes to diagnosis and treatment of some of these behavioral issues we're speaking about, and a lot of times they are put on different medications, Ritalin, Adderall are very common. The problem is a lot of the side effects that come along with that. So parents coming to me typically are the parents that have started with that treatment plan first, and their kids are experiencing a decrease in their appetite and weight loss, sometimes even headaches and sleep disturbances.
Those can be attributed perhaps not just to food, but to some of the medication that they're taking?
Yes, a lot of those are some of the side effects of those big medications.
Okay.
So a lot of times parents are looking for different alternatives, or they're looking to combine nutrition and medication. And so I meet them where they're at. I never tell a parent that they need to be coming off of medications. That's something between the parent and the physician, certainly. But from a nutrition standpoint, we still can be running, these tests and finding out if there's, what are the foods that are causing inflammation and potentially could be causing some of the symptoms that they're experiencing with their ADD.
Okay. I wasn't sure how far you were going to go, and I just thought of a question, so I was writing it down.
That's okay.
So a child, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the kids, although I know you work with adults and people who have everything from adults that have Asperger's, as well as people that have tick-borne illnesses, Lyme disease, and so forth. And all of these can be affected by nutrition. But I want to focus just a little bit on our students, because I know that there are parents listening in particular who are going to want some answers to some questions as to so how do they go about getting some information on whether or not their child's diet is having an effect, because they've tried everything. They've tried medication, they've tried punishment, they've tried therapists, they've tried everything, and nothing is working. Mm-hmm. How do they go about getting some information? So let's say they go onto your website at Pursue Wellness and pursuewellness.us. What are the steps that you will take them through in order to go through this process of getting this information?
So we actually have on our website, under Cindy, who's been a practitioner I work with, and myself, under our bios, there'll be links that people can sign up for 20-minute free consultations to see, because sometimes something's more frustrating than getting involved with a new healthcare provider, and you really don't know what you're going to get from it. So we're really huge on offering 20 to 30 minutes of a free phone call to see how we can help, because everything that we do, and we feel very strongly about individualized care. It's not a one-size-fits-all model for functional medicine or functional nutrition, for that matter. We really want to dig deep into the individual, of what's going on, their symptoms, what their diet looks like. Everyone is different, and that's why MRT is nice too, the Mediator Release Test that we're talking about, because it is so individualized. We can't really say that all foods are healthy for everyone. With my work with this test, I found that even the simplest foods that we think are healthy, while they are, some people's body may be negatively reacting to those foods. So that's why it's so important to to do tests like this, or we also offer like micronutrient testing to see if there's any type of micronutrient or mineral imbalances that we could then supplement them through supplements or through diet, and put them down that path as well.
If somebody doesn't live nearby and they get in touch with you, do you do this, via FaceTime somehow? Do they send in samples of things? How do they,
Yes.
how do they connect with you?
So we are a 100% virtual platform, so they don't need to live nearby. We can do, some people are comfortable with the phone. We absolutely can use the phone, but we use a HIPAA compliant software through Practice Better, it's called. It's the portal we use for our medical records, and we're able to use video chat to talk through the portal, and they can. There's also messaging, HIPAA compliant messaging that they can be, emailing us, quote unquote, through that software. So they have a lot of different options for that, but everything else can be done from afar for our work that we're doing. We drop ship kits to them, it's called. So if they wanted to do an MRT test, or they wanted to do a micronutrient test, or if they wanted to dive into, gut health, we have other tests for that. All these kits are shipped directly to their home.
Kind of like ancestry.com.
Exactly.
Exactly. They'll back to you.
That's exactly what it is. And it's going to go directly to the lab. So as soon as they get that, they send it right to the lab, and then the lab provides us with results, and then we schedule, further follow-up appointments to discuss results and an action plan.
In our conversation before, you used kind of some comparative terms. And I know that your approach, which is more holistic, is an integrated approach with medical as well. You don't say that you shouldn't do one or you should only do the other. But you said that the medical approach was basically sick care, and the holistic approach was more proactive. So can you talk to me a little bit about how Pursue Wellness lives up to that concept of being proactive while integrating the medical approach?
Yes, we're all about mixing the two worlds. We're very big on evidence-based practice, so we would never be doing something that hasn't been proven, safe and effective, of course. And so our approach is, like I talked about earlier, it's getting down to the cellular level. We're looking at how our immune system is triggered by food. We're looking at micronutrient status, which really at the core of everything, our bodies physiologically need certain micronutrients in food to operate, efficiently. So we're looking at things that may be overlooked in conventional medicine. We're asking a lot of different deep dive questions, all the way from whether or not, the child was a natural birth versus a cesarean section. I mean, we're looking at, we're very detail oriented. We want to know the timeline of how things have been occurring. When did symptoms start? And really look at, antibiotic usage. We're asking a lot of different questions to be the investigators, to be looking at what could potentially be going on. Because I said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Usually by the time people are getting to us, it's the people that have gone through the typical steps already with their traditional doctor. So we're kind of filling in the gaps on what has been potentially overlooked.
You said that you get right down to the cellular level, not having a medical background or understanding what that means. I'm sure there are other people that don't understand that either. What do you mean you get down to the cellular level? Well, I'm thinking of a biopsy, but I'm sure that's not what you mean.
No biopsy. So a lot of the functional tests we use is getting down to, the physiology of the body, how it's functioning, for one being, we do an organic acids test, it's called. So that's a urine test. And we're looking at some of the, basically through our urine, there's a lot of different, it's called organic acids, different byproducts of chemical processes happening in the body we can look at, and it gives us an idea on nutrient status, vitamin status. That's one test. And also it'll show you a little bit about what's going on in the gut, which I know you have, another
Your
podcast
mom's going to be
coming up, right?
Yeah,
So yes. So that is, you'll dive deep into that for the next podcast, but you can really look, the gut is kind of the hub of the body, we're finding. And it really, the gut, when I say gut, I mean, the stomach, the intestines, it really is a second brain, research is suggesting, because the brain and gut actually develop from the same tissue during fetal development. And then it branches off into one being the central nervous system, and the second, they call it the enteric nervous system, which becomes, the gut. And so we're finding that looking at the different gut bacteria, which is affected by what we eat, can play a role in inflammation, metabolism, immune health, etc. So it's looking at some of these tests, and the results will really give us ideas of where to begin so that we can really promote healing in the best way we know how.
When you and I spoke, you mentioned some specific nutrients, I guess they're called, that you said may be the cause of certain behavior issues. And so what I'm thinking is, if maybe you can take each of these and talk a little bit about how someone might react if they were deficient, say, in omega-3 fatty acids, or in magnesium or iron or zinc, were some of the ones you gave me. How would that present itself in our behavior? What would we do that we would not do if we had enough iron, for example? I know I'm saying that because I'm familiar a little bit that if you don't have enough iron, you're tired.
Yes, iron's big with in fatigue. When you're low, fatigue could be an issue. Attention and memory can be an issue as well.
What kind of deficiency would be present if attention was an issue, for example? What might you take if you found that someone was deficient in magnesium, and one of the complaints was that a child was having trouble focusing? Would you say, now I understand why they're having trouble focusing?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's simply, and when I was talking about like the cellular level, all of our cells require a lot of these different micronutrients in the form of vitamins and minerals, and our body simply can't function well and optimally without them. Magnesium is a huge one right now. They're estimating that at least 50% of the population is deficient in magnesium. It's a huge one. It's involved in, they're estimating somewhere between 300 to 900 enzymatic reactions happening in the body. So if it's not present, our body...
because we're not eating the right foods, we're eating a lot of fast foods? Is that what it is? If we're not really creating a diet for ourselves, we're just grabbing stuff?
Yeah, it's a mixture of it's a mixture of a couple things. One, yes, poor diet. The standard American diet consists of a lot of processed foods, a lot of convenience foods, and a lot of these specific nutrients we were just referring to, which have been all linked to behavioral issues: iron, magnesium, zinc, and your omega-3s. Those are the big four that we can dive a little bit into right now. But magnesium, it's rich in foods like avocados and leafy greens and nuts, a lot of different foods that children may or may not be consuming.
I'm sure kids are coming home saying, can I have an avocado?
Exactly. It's not a part of the typical. So that's where I come in. It's really giving ideas on how we can incorporate it into their diet. How can we make some of this food fun for them and taste good? It's a process, but so one being that it's just really not, they're not consuming it on a daily basis. The other thing with a lot of these nutrients is our soil over time has the content, the richness of it in terms of minerals has been decreasing for decades now, and simply because of our agriculture processes here and our practices and the pesticide use on our crops as well has an impact on the nutrient content of our soil, and then in turn our produce. So that's another big one.
Do you test with this test that you give people? Does it show if they have pesticides in their system?
So we do one of our tests that we use through Great Plains can test for, yes, different pesticides.
Wow.
Yeah, so we can, and actually I had just read not too long ago a study on this, actually for, I believe it was for ADD and ADHD children. Their symptoms increased tremendously. It was found with the children that had higher levels of glyphosate,
which is
the pesticide, which is commonly referred to as, Roundup. Most people know it as. So
right.
we did find a correlation between symptomatology of their ADD alongside higher levels of pesticides in their body. So it's something that we need to be focusing on. And I know you and I had talked a little bit about this too initially, is the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list.
Yes, I was going to get to that, but go ahead. First of all, I have to ask you one question, because I was talking to a neighbor and I was telling them that I was going to be speaking with you. And they said, ask her a question for me. So this is the question. If you are buying foods that you're going to peel, like bananas, if you're going to peel an apple, do you need to get organic, or can you buy regular produce if you're going to peel it?
So it's a great question.
Good question.
Yeah, it is. So that's why I love referring to the Dirty Dozen Clean 15 list that we can dive into. But a lot of times we'll find that foods that have the big peels or thick layers of skin typically aren't as much of a concern. The pesticide residue doesn't permeate that as it would something with thinner skin. So what I'm referring to is the EWG, so the Environmental Working Group, each year puts out lists of foods that have higher pesticide residue. So those are the Dirty Dozen. So that means they put out new foods every year. They list 12 of the dirtiest, quote unquote, foods if you're going to buy. Your best bet is to buy them organic to avoid the pesticide residue that's typically on them when they're grown conventionally. So a lot of so I'll give you a couple of them. Actually, the list is sitting right next to me here. These are foods right now on the 2019 Dirty Dozen list. So these are the foods that you want to buy organic if possible. So strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes.
Wow.
So these are on this year's Dirty Dozen list. These foods tend to have the highest pesticide residue.
Potatoes.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yes. So important in terms of kids struggling with behavioral concerns, specifically ADD, linking back to that study I just referred to, especially if kids are very prone to more behavioral issues and more symptoms of ADD alongside, pesticide exposure. So in this case, you want to be focusing on those 12 foods, buying those organic. On the flip side, because I'll hear a lot of people say, well, it's so expensive to eat organic.
Yes.
So that's why I always refer to this list, because then there's also the flip side. They come out with the cleanest. They have 15 of the cleanest foods that they've tested, meaning those foods, if you want to save some money and not buy organic, it's good to do so because they've tested those foods and they seem to have the least amount of pesticide residue on them. So those 15 foods for 2019, so these you can buy conventionally, no need to buy organic. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, sweet peas, onions, papayas, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis, cabbage, cauliflower, cantaloupe, broccoli, mushrooms, honeydew melon. So a lot of those have the thicker skin. So, the honey or rinds. So you have, your honeydew melons, your cantaloupes, avocados. So things typically, yes, with the thicker skin or ones that you're going to peel and dispose of, yes, are your best bets for not having to buy those organic.
So have they done any kind of an evaluation, a cost analysis of how much it costs to maintain this proposed diet that you're would be recommending to people, as opposed to just going out and buying their groceries the way they normally do? Is it more expensive to do this?
To do the LEAP diet, or
yes, if you're going onto the LEAP diet.
Not necessarily. It's going to be focusing on different foods, though. So it's hard to. I've never done a cost analysis, to be honest with you. No, because everyone's different. So it's hard to say what foods are going to trigger and what foods they're going to need to focus on. So everyone's different. But that's why I always refer them back to the list. So when it comes to buying organic versus non-organic, for produce at least, I always refer back to this list, because I want to always make, as food as affordable as possible for everyone, because that is a concern for some. So making sure that we refer to this list to know the foods that are where our money is best well spent.
Is there any advice that you would like to give mentors who are listening, teachers, what they should be looking for in the classroom, parents, what they might see at home with their children, administrators, where they're constantly getting certain kids into the office for behavior issues, and they know they have a diagnosis that often presents itself with this kind of behavior. Are there any behaviors that you feel might be a red flag, where a parent, where someone would say, I think you ought to look into their diet, because, yes, they have ADHD and we know they're very active, but they've become very, and I don't want to say this is something, but I'm just using it as an example, they become more aggressive, or they're very tired, or would there be anything that you would suggest that people use as a reason maybe to look into this particular option?
I honestly think most people would benefit from it. With what I'm seeing in the research for some of these micronutrients that we were talking about. So, we talked a little bit about iron, and sometimes fatigue could be, one of the symptoms. Magnesium, a lot of times you'll find that kids with chronic constipation likely aren't getting enough magnesium, because magnesium at the cellular level is used for smooth muscle contractions, etc. So and that
would make me cranky.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's true. It's is it the chicken or the egg sometimes? What is causing the issues? But yes, chronic constipation would definitely be a concern. That's a huge red flag.
Kids don't always share that with their parents, though, but it's something probably parents should be asking their children about.
Absolutely. Yes, their bowel habits. Absolutely. Zinc also is another big one. It's huge involvement in neurotransmitter synthesis, which is also starts in the gut. And we know kids with some of these mental disorders or mood disorders, et cetera, behavioral issues, neurotransmitters are a big focus in terms of research. So zinc, some foods for zinc would be, shellfish, legumes, seeds. Once again, a lot of the foods that a lot of children may not be exposed to, are not eating. So a lot of times with these micronutrient deficiencies are at
by play. Micronutrients, just to be clear, you're talking about all these specific supplements, the iron,
exactly, the magnesium, zinc, all the vitamins and minerals.
Okay, vitamins and minerals. Okay.
Yes, are crucial, and also the fourth one we haven't touched about yet, but there's some really great research out recently on omega-3 supplementation with children with behavioral disorders. So omega-3
is that considered a nutrient? Omega-3.
Yes, it's an essential fatty acid. So we need to be consuming these foods. Our body doesn't make them. It means we need to be consuming it, whether it's in supplement form or dietary form. So omega-3s are rich in foods like salmon and eggs, walnuts, chia and flax seeds.
Wow.
So like I said, though, once again, in the pediatric population, in our children population, some of these foods may not be, as popular. So a lot of times with our patients, we're really encouraging supplementation. If we really aren't able to get these nutrients in via the food, supplements become a huge portion of, our practice, because and during my conventional training, we were taught for so long that, food should be first. And that is absolutely true. But we're finding that we're just not getting enough because of food preferences, whether or not it's because, like we talked about, the soil is less than providing lately in terms of some of these rich micronutrients. So we need to be adding supplementation. I always recommend, one of our favorites for omega-3s that parents can look into is Nordic Naturals. That's one of my favorite brands. They're rigorous in testing their supplements, and it's a highly recommended brand that we like.
Kerah, I have learned so much from this conversation, and I hope that our mentors who are listening will take advantage of your website, pursuewellness.us, to get more information, perhaps to get in touch with you. You've given a whole list of websites that people can go to, and I can't put them all out now, but I will post them, as many as I can, on the recording when we put it up on our podcast. I want to thank you so much for coming today and for sharing so much information. And I know that this takes a lot of your time and you're very busy, and I want to thank you so much for coming.
Oh, wonderful to meet you. I am so happy we're able to talk about a really important subject that, like, I feel is really overlooked.
Thank you for joining us. And please go, mentors, to justeducationfirst.com to look over the other podcasts, give us some feedback as to ideas that you may have for future topics, and whether you find the information we're giving you, if it has led you in the right direction. You'll also be able to find us on YouTube. And I hope that you will join us for the next part of our series, which will be coming up in another week. And we're going to continue our investigation into nutrition and how it affects behavior. Thank you all. Thank you, mentors, for being with us today. If you found this podcast of value, please visit justeducationfirst.com to subscribe to our blog and mentorship and education podcast so that you may continue the exploration with us. Our goal is to provide a free treasury of information for our listeners so they can become acquainted with the amazing resources that we have available to us. We want to thank all of our guests for giving their time and sharing their wealth of information with us. Please also visit their websites and explore more of their resources to further your pursuit of the topic. Hope to hear from you at justeducationfirst.com. Have a good week, and thank you.